Everything we had went to your sister, my mother said, sliding the folded letter across the white tablecloth like it was a gift. You're on your own now, Tessa. My graduation cap was hanging off the back of my chair. My diploma sat beside a slice of chocolate cake nobody had touched. 12 people watched me open the envelope, and not one of them spoke. Dad leaned back, arms crossed. You'll need to be out of the house by Sunday night. I stared at him, waiting for the laugh, the correction, anything that made this less real. Mom gave me that soft, public smile she used when she wanted people to think she was being kind. Chloe needs more support right now. You have your degree. It's time you stopped depending on us. Across from me, my younger sister Chloe looked down at her designer purse, the one my parents had somehow afforded last month after telling me they were behind on bills. My first instinct was to whisper, "I'm sorry." Then I stopped, because in my bag, beneath my graduation program, was one sealed envelope they didn't know I had. I folded their letter slowly, reached down, and pulled out the cream-colored envelope with the attorney's letterhead. Then I slid it across the table to my father. Dad frowned, opened it, read the first line and went completely pale. The silence around the table changed. Before that moment, everyone had been uncomfortable for me. Now they were watching him. Mom's smile tightened. "Robert, what is that?" He didn't answer. Aunt Marlene, sitting 2 chairs down, leaned forward. "Tessa, honey, what did you give him?" I kept my hands in my lap so no one would see them shaking. "A letter." Dad's eyes moved over the page again, faster this time, like the words might change if he read them hard enough. Mom reached for his wrist. "Robert." He pulled the paper closer to his chest. That was when I knew. For 3 weeks I had wondered if I was being dramatic. If maybe the strange mail questions, the missing envelopes, the sudden push to clean Grandma Rose's attic boxes, and Chloe's nervous glances were all unrelated. But my father's face told me they were. I looked at the letter my parents had handed me, the one that erased me from the family at my own graduation dinner. Then I looked at the letter Grandma's lawyer had sent. And for the first time all night, I wasn't the one cornered. Dad swallowed hard, his voice barely working. "Where did you get this?" Dad's fingers locked around the attorney's letter. Mom's eyes cut to me, then to the envelope, then back to Dad. "Robert, give it to me." He didn't. That was the part that made my stomach drop. My father had never hesitated when my mother wanted something handled. They moved like one person when it came to me. Mom softened the blow. Dad delivered it. Chloe benefited from it. I adjusted around it. But now Dad held that letter like it had burned him. I didn't answer his question. I just watched his face. "Where did you get this?" he asked again, quieter this time. Before I could speak, my mind pulled me back to that morning. I had come downstairs in my gown at 9:23 because I remembered looking at the microwave clock. I had stood at the bottom of the stairs with my cap in one hand and my phone in the other, hoping someone would say, "Let's take a picture." Mom was in the living room, steaming Chloe's blue dress for dinner. Chloe wasn't graduating. "Can you move?" Mom said without looking at me. "You're blocking the outlet." I stepped aside. Dad came in from the garage, keys in his hand. "You ready?" I smiled before I could stop myself. "Can we take one picture first?" He looked at my gown, then at the window. "Stand over there if you want light." So I stood by the window alone. Mom snapped one picture so quickly my eyes were half closed. Then Chloe came over and adjusted my tassel. "Oh, that's cute," Mom said suddenly, lifting the phone again. "Chloe, fix it like you're helping her." She took 3 pictures of Chloe smiling beside me. In every photo, my sister looked like the reason I had graduated. I told myself not to care. I had spent 4 years teaching myself not to care. I worked late shifts at the campus library. I paid for books with tips from weekend catering jobs. I came home during Mom's treatments and cooked, cleaned, drove Chloe to appointments, and still got called dramatic when I looked tired. But that morning, standing in my gown while Mom fussed over Chloe's dress, something inside me had gone quiet. Then I heard them in the kitchen. I had been halfway down the hall when Mom said, "After tonight, she can't keep expecting us to carry her." Dad answered, "She'll cry, but she always adjusts." I froze. Mom sighed. I don't want a scene. Then don't make it sound cruel, Dad said. Say Chloe needs us more. Tessa likes being responsible. She'll turn it into some sacrifice and move on. I remember pressing my hand against the wall, not because I was about to fall, but because a small, stupid part of me still wanted to believe they were talking about rent. Maybe chores. Maybe me getting a job after graduation and contributing more. Not this. Not a letter at dinner. Not Sunday night. And the worst part was, the red flags had been there for weeks. Chloe had started asking about my mail. Did anything weird come for you? She asked one afternoon too casually while scrolling through her phone. Weird house. I don't know, like official stuff, law office stuff. I had looked up from my laptop. Why would a law office send me anything? Her thumb stopped moving for half a second. No reason. I saw a commercial. Mom had also started checking the mailbox before I got home. Not once or twice. Every day. If I asked, she said, I'm expecting insurance paperwork, even though she never opened anything in front of me. Then Dad told me to clear out the attic. You'll be moving eventually, he said. No point leaving your junk up there. Most of it wasn't mine. It was Grandma Rose's. Old sewing boxes, photo albums, a cracked ceramic angel, receipts tied with ribbon, things Dad said were worthless. Donate what you don't need, he told me. I almost did. But Grandma Rose had been the only person in that family who looked directly at me when she spoke. She remembered my exam dates. She slipped grocery money into my coat pocket when I was too proud to ask. 2 weeks before she died, she held my hand in her hospital room and said, Tessa, you will never have to beg this family to value you. After the funeral, Mom said Grandma had left a few sentimental things and nothing more. I believed her because believing her hurt less than questioning everything. Until I found the envelope in the attic. Now back at the restaurant, Dad still had the attorney's letter open in front of him. His face had not recovered. Mom leaned closer, her voice sharpened under the softness. Robert, let me see. He shifted the paper away. That tiny movement did more than any confession could have. Mom noticed it too, her cheeks flushed. Why are you acting like that? I finally spoke. Before you tell everyone I'm on my own, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. Maybe you should finish reading what Grandma's lawyer sent me. Aunt Marlene's fork lowered onto her plate with a small clink. Chloe's head snapped up. Dad looked at Mom. Not confused. Caught. Mom's chair scraped back just enough to make everyone look at her. Tessa, you don't know what you're talking about. Then let Dad read it, I said. Her eyes flashed. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Mom lunged across the table and grabbed for the envelope. Mom's fingers closed around the corner of the envelope. I pulled back. The paper tore with a sharp, ugly sound that sliced through the restaurant louder than any shout could have. 3 tables turned at once. A waiter stopped beside the drink station, holding a tray against his chest. Aunt Marlene rose halfway from her chair. Chloe whispered, Mom, stop, but she said it too late and too softly to matter. Mom froze with a torn strip of cream paper in her hand. I held the rest. Dad stood quickly. Everybody sit down. Aunt Marlene's eyes narrowed. Why is Elaine grabbing legal mail at a graduation dinner? It's a family misunderstanding, Dad said. But his voice cracked on family. That crack changed everything. Until then, my parents had controlled the room. Mom had made herself look wounded. Dad had made himself look reasonable. I had been the ungrateful daughter being corrected in public. Now people were staring at them. Not me. Mom tried to smile at Aunt Marlene. Tessa found something old and confused herself, that's all. I looked at the torn envelope in my hand and made a choice. All my life they had pulled me into side rooms, hallways, kitchens, parked cars, anywhere private, anywhere they could tell me what I felt, what I owed, what I was allowed to say. But this time they had chosen the restaurant, they had chosen the audience. So I unfolded the letter. Dad's face hardened. Tessa. I read the first line out loud. Dear Ms. Marlowe, Our office has made several attempts to contact you regarding assets left to you by Rose Marlowe, including funds designated for education and future housing. The table went silent again. But this silence was different. Aunt Marlene whispered, "Rose left you assets." Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. Mom's hand tightened around the torn strip. "That doesn't mean what you think it means." I kept my eyes on the letter. "It says education and future housing." Dad reached for control again. "Your grandmother was elderly. There were documents everywhere. You don't understand estate language." Aunt Marlene turned on him. "Rose told me Tessa would be taken care of." Mom snapped, "Marlene, stay out of this." "No," Aunt Marlene said, fully standing now. "At her graduation dinner, you hand that girl a letter saying she has nothing, and now there's a lawyer saying Rose left her something. I'm not staying out of it." A couple at the nearest table pretended not to listen while listening to every word. Chloe suddenly said, "Grandma was confused near the end." I looked at her. The whole table seemed to tilt. "What did you just say?" I asked. Chloe blinked too fast. "I mean, everyone knows she was sick." "No," I said. "You said that like you knew what the letter was about." "I don't. You asked me last week if anything came from a law office." Her cheeks went pink. "I saw something online and wondered." "At random." Mom cut in quickly. "Stop interrogating your sister. Chloe has been under enough stress." That almost made me laugh, not because it was funny but because it was so familiar. Chloe could cry over a parking ticket and the house rearranged itself around her. I could come home after a double shift and still be asked why the laundry wasn't folded. Chloe needed support. Chloe needed patience. Chloe needed the purse sitting in her lap, the car parked outside, the life my parents said they could not afford to help me start. Mom turned to the relatives, lowering her voice like she was saving me from myself. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Tessa gets one letter and suddenly she thinks everyone owes her something." "I didn't say that," I said. "You have a degree now," Mom continued. "Your sister is struggling. Why are you trying to take from her?" There it was. The flip. The cut became generosity. The theft became need. The daughter they abandoned became the selfish one. I lifted my phone from the table and opened the photo I had taken in the attic. "This is what I found in Grandma's sewing box," I said, turning the screen toward Aunt Marlene. "A bank reference number. It was tucked behind a false bottom. The same number appears in this letter." Dad's jaw tightened. "And that sewing box," I added, looking at him, "was in the attic pile you told me to donate." Aunt Marlene took my phone with careful fingers. "Robert." Dad didn't answer. Mom's voice sharpened. "You had no right digging through old family things." "They were Grandma's things," I said, "and apparently one of them had my name on it." The waiter finally approached, followed by the manager, a woman in a black blazer who looked like she had broken up enough anniversary fights to know when a table was about to become a problem. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. Dad immediately turned toward her. "Yes, we're leaving." "No, we're not," Aunt Marlene said. Mom hissed, "Marlene." The manager looked at me, then at the torn legal envelope, then at my graduation gown over the chair. Her expression shifted just slightly. Dad leaned closer to me. He kept his voice low enough that only our table could hear. "Put that letter away," he said, "or you'll regret what happens when we get home." For years that sentence would have worked. Home meant locked doors. Home meant Dad's silence and Mom's tears. Home meant Chloe listening from the stairs while I apologized just to make the night end. But now his threat landed differently. Because if the letter was real, home was no longer the only place I had. I folded the page once and kept it in my hand. Aunt Marlene was still staring at the photo on my phone. Her face had gone pale in a way that matched Dad's. "Robert," she said slowly, "why does that letter mention an account you told us was closed?" Dad stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "This dinner is over," he said. Mom grabbed Chloe's wrist. "Get your coat." Chloe didn't move right away. Her eyes were fixed on the letter in my hand. That hesitation told me more than any answer could have. Dad reached for the bill folder, but Aunt Marlene stepped between him and the aisle. "No one is leaving until you answer me." "I don't answer to you," Dad said. "No," she said, voice shaking, "but you may have to answer to a lawyer." For once, I didn't chase after my parents' approval. I opened my phone and dialed the number printed on the letter. It went to voicemail, so I played the message I had saved 3 days earlier. A woman's voice filled the table. "Ms. Marlowe, this is Calder and Voss. We've had several notices sent to your family address returned or signed for by another party regarding the Rose Marlowe Trust matter." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Everything clicked into place. Mom waiting by the mailbox, Chloe asking about law office envelopes, Dad pushing me to donate Grandma's attic boxes, the expensive purse, the sudden demand that I leave by Sunday. Aunt Marlene turned to me. "Where did you find the paperwork?" "In Grandma's sewing box," I said. "Behind a false bottom, there was a trust reference number and a note." Dad's face darkened. I swallowed and read it. "For Tessa only, do not let Robert manage this." Aunt Marlene looked at him like she had finally recognized something ugly. "Rose never trusted you after you borrowed money from her and never paid it back." Dad pointed at her. "You poisoned her against me." Chloe suddenly burst out. "I didn't know it was Tessa's money at first. They said Grandma wanted us to share." The table froze. Dad snatched the original letter from my hand and crushed it. I reached into my bag, pulled out a second copy and set it flat on the table. Then I placed my phone beside it, the voice memo from earlier still saved. The dinner wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was evidence. Then my phone rang. The caller ID read, "Calder and Voss attorneys." I answered on speaker. "This is Tessa Marlowe." A man's voice came through clearly. "Ms. Marlowe, this is Daniel Calder from Calder and Voss. I'm returning your call. Are you somewhere you can speak privately?" I looked around the table. At Mom's white knuckles, at Dad's clenched jaw, at Chloe's mascara gathering under her eyes, at Aunt Marlene standing between my father and the exit. "No," I said, "but I'm somewhere I need the truth said out loud." There was a pause. Then Mr. Calder said, "You verified your identity with our office earlier this week, so I can confirm the basics. Your grandmother, Rose Marlowe, created a protected trust for you before her death. It included education funds and instructions to begin transferring her house to you after graduation." Mom whispered, "Tessa." I didn't look at her. Mr. Calder continued, "Our office sent multiple notices to your family address. Some were signed for, others were returned. We were later informed your parents were assisting with family paperwork." Aunt Marlene's hand covered her mouth. Dad snapped, "That is not what happened." Mr. Calder's voice stayed even. "What happened with the account is now under review. Some reimbursements appear tied to legitimate tuition expenses, others do not. We will need documentation for several withdrawals." Chloe started crying harder. I turned to her. "The car." She pressed her lips together. "The purse?" I asked. Mom finally broke. "We were going to fix it." "By throwing me out," I said. Dad leaned over the table. "I did what I had to do for this family." Nobody answered him, not one person. Mr. Calder explained the rest. The final notice required my direct signature. If I moved out quickly, lost access to Grandma's papers, and felt too ashamed to ask questions, Dad could delay everything long enough to pressure me into signing a family settlement. So that was why they chose tonight. They had not cut me off because I was finished needing them. They cut me off because I was close to finding out they had needed me ignorant. I picked up their letter and placed it beside Grandma's attorney letter. One said I had nothing. The other proved they had been hiding what was mine. Aunt Marlene turned to Dad. "Do not call me for help." A family friend from Mom's church stood up, pushed in her chair, and left without saying goodbye. Mom watched her go like she had just lost something she could not buy back. The next morning I met Mr. Calder. He froze the remaining trust access and started the process of recovering what had been taken. Dad and Mom hired a lawyer. Their threat to make me homeless disappeared because Grandma's house across town was legally waiting for me. Chloe lost the car when the payments were traced back. Later, she admitted she had suspected the truth, but chose comfort over asking questions. That hurt more quietly than the dinner did. Mom left voicemails that started with apologies and ended with blame. Dad sent one text, "You embarrassed this family." I deleted it. 2 weeks later, I moved into Grandma Rose's house. The wallpaper was faded. The garden was wild. The front step creaked when I carried my diploma inside. But every room felt honest. I placed my degree on the mantel, beside Grandma's photograph, and stood there until the house settled around me. My parents lost the money, the story, and the control they thought they still had. I gained a home no one could threaten to take away. They handed me a letter to erase me from the family, but Grandma's letter proved I was never the one who had been written out.